Hello, I'm Henry Keenan and we are UATV English. We are online giving you the Ukrainian perspective of reality. Watching the episode, solely one topic for today, Pavutyna, Spiderweb. Even by just watching this episode, you help us a lot to fight off Russian aggression. Please comment and subscribe to our channel while watching it, as it helps Ukrainian voice to be heard worldwide. Welcome to the News Pulse. Many used to think of Vladimir Putin as the spider, and maybe he is, just a Russian spider caught in Ukrainian web. On June 1st, Ukraine's security service carried out a very special operation codenamed Spiderweb, which had been meticulously planned over the course of a year and a half. As part of the operation, a massive drone strike was launched against the Belaya airbase in Russia's far northern Irkutsk region. The drones launched from a truck parked near the military airfield, so it is like drones were sent from Russia with love back to Russia. The Special Forces, the SSU, also targeted the airbases Olenya, Voskresensky, Dyagilevo and Ivanovo. The operation, planned for over 18 months, involved FPV drones that were covertly transported deep into Russian territory under disguise, inside trucks with wooden cabin roofs. And when the time was right, the cabins just opened remotely, allowing the drones to launch and successfully target strategic bomber aircrafts at several military airfields in Russia. After delivering the deadly strikes, the trucks themselves exploded and burned. Rumor has it, Russians now have a massive trucker phobia. It is when you are afraid of unidentified trucks.
This is the Srednaya town. The road is closed or something. We were driving through the fields, literally. The traffic jam made of lorries is enormous. I don't know for how many kilometers this does go.
Now, this was truly unprecedented and unique secret operation to simultaneously hit 4 military airfields in the Russian rear, where enemy aircraft were deployed. The drone targeted successfully 41 aircraft, including A-50, Tu-95, Tu-22M3 and Tu-160, as the head of the SBU, Lieutenant General Vasyl Malyuk, confirmed. Footage right from the scene shows several large aircraft ablaze and then exploding. Russia's defense ministry later admitted that 4 air bases were indeed struck in what they describe as a terrorist attack, and commented that several aircraft caught fire in both Murmansk and Irkutsk.
Look, what's happening? I don't even know what had just exploded.
We're cooked. We are really cooked.
Well, according not to Russian minister, but to reality, more than 40 enemy aircraft were destroyed completely, and that is about 40% of Russia's strategic cruise missile carriers fleet. This includes strategic bombers as well as A-50, unique airborne early warning and control aircraft. As Ukraine's security service said, the wave of drone strikes destroyed Russian military planes worth an estimate $7 billion. That is, in just one day. However, of course, the operation took more than a year to prepare and was personally monitored and supervised by President Volodymyr Zelensky. The detailed planning and execution was led by SSU Chief General Vasyl Malyuk and specialists from the agency. And Western former high-ranking military officers already have reacted promptly to this operation that really demonstrates that Ukraine has them cards, and quite powerful aces, if you ask me.
The coordinated and synchronized attack today, which appears to have decimated much of the Russian air fleet that were based over 4,000 kilometers from the front line, is showing that Ukraine certainly has many aces in the hole. The U.S. should immediately fast-track the Blumenthal-Graham bill and return to supporting Ukraine. Mark Hertling, retired United States Army Lieutenant General, Commanding General of United States Army Europe in 2011 to 2012, on X social network. Apparently, President Zelensky does have some cards. Ben Hodges, retired United States Army Lieutenant General, Commanding General of United States Army Europe in 2014 to 2017, on X social network.
carry out the operation, Ukraine's security service first smuggled FPV drones into Russia. These wooden cabins where drones were hidden, mounted were on trucks, concealed the drones under their roofs. These rooftops were remotely opened and then drones were launched. But these were Ukrainian drones assembled just 6 kilometers away from the FSB building in Chelyabinsk. The individuals involved in preparing the operations are all now safely back in Ukraine. So if you hear about any further arrests of supposed perpetrators, it will simply be staged for the domestic Russian audience. President Zelensky shared a few details on the whole thing in his daily address.
What's most interesting, and this can now be stated publicly, is that the office of our operation on Russian territory was located directly next to FSB headquarters in one of their regions. In total, 117 drones were used in the operation, with a corresponding number of drone operators involved. 34% of the strategic cruise missile carriers stationed at air bases were hit. Our personnel operated across multiple Russian regions in 3 different time zones. And the people who assisted us were withdrawn from Russian territory before the operation. They are now safe. It is genuinely satisfying when something I authorized a year and 6 months ago comes to fruition and deprives Russians of over 40 units of strategic aviation. We will continue this work.
Well, the story was, of course, picked up by global media outlets, including The Guardian, The Washington Post, BBC News, Sky News, New York Post and others, and we talked to our longtime friend Lieutenant Colonel Glenn Grant about the military aftermath of this bold pinpoint operation. Let's hear the expert.
I don't think it's. I think large scale is the wrong term to use, but very clever, sophisticated, and valuable. Yes. Because of course, some of the drone attacks have been huge and much larger in size, but not with such precision as this one, of actually going into really close up to airfields and then striking them. So in that way, it will certainly be talked about as a turning point for warfare in the future. The aim was airfields which had the bombers on them that have been used, or nuclear bombers, let's call them that, which have been used to throw bombs at Ukraine. So bombs and cruise missiles. So they're actually quite important in terms of the Russian attacks on our major cities and the electric power plants and things. So reducing the number of those certainly puts a bit more pressure on Russia, because not only do they have fewer of them to use, but of course it means that the load on the ones that are left increases, which means that their maintenance also has to increase. So it's going to put a maintenance load on fewer bombers. And that's actually quite a significant thing for Russians to deal with. I mean, I think that's probably more valuable in its outcome than actually what they actually destroyed on the ground, because it now shows that everywhere in Russia is now a target, or can be a target, and that has certainly got to worry the. It's certainly got to worry the sort of the leadership in Russian regions, but also it must worry all the civil aviation, because they now know that that they can suffer from exactly the same as this pretty much anywhere in Russia. That's a good question. I have no idea. Absolutely no idea whatsoever how much of this was supporters. I mean, there is an inevitability that somebody or some people in Russia actually support Ukraine, because there are Ukrainians in Russia. So there's got to be some sort of support. But whether this operation was helped by those people, or whether it was just the ingenuity of the SBU, I have no idea at all. In a hurry. I mean, if this one took 18 months from planning to delivery, unless they've already got another 3 or 4 running, I don't think we'll see anything in a hurry. But what it will do is where they've got things like the bridges collapsing because of bad engineering and because of, tired bridges from old Soviet concrete. People will start now declaring that this is, Ukrainian attacks in the rear and things like this. So it may have a public relations effect much, much wider than the actual attack itself. Oh, completely. Um, because what it's shown is that everywhere, and I'm not talking about Russia now, I'm talking about everywhere, every country in the world that has that has lorries driving through it is now vulnerable. I mean, it's going to make the job of border guards everywhere completely different. But you can imagine someone doing this with, say, a yacht going into one of the harbors in America, and what they could actually do to a nearby airfield. So there's going to be a lot of deep thinking by terrorist groups everywhere about how to actually to continue this sort of activity. And it means that defense forces and governments everywhere are going to have to rethink how and where they spend their money on security. I don't think security is going to become cheaper in the next 20 years.
And pro-military bloggers and journalists and warmongers of all sorts and propagandists from Russia, they all describe Sunday's strike as a Russian Pearl Harbor. They, of course, called for revenge. Just a few quotes for you. "We hope the response will be like the US reaction to Pearl Harbor or even harsher," wrote military blogger Roman Alokhin on his Telegram channel. Well, I don't believe Pearl Harbor is a proper comparison here, as we must not forget who the real aggressor is here. Russia invaded Ukraine, and Russian planes are bombing Ukrainian residential areas, not the other way around. Comparing this operation to Pearl Harbor is complete nonsense, an attempt to trigger negative associations in the American audience, as simple as that. Russia is a terrorist and is using terrorist tactics, striking civilian areas every night, killing innocent people in Ukraine. These are war crimes. In contrast, Ukraine targets solely legitimate military facilities in full compliance with the laws and customs of war. On the economic aftermath after this Spiderweb attack, we have talked with President of the Kyiv School of Economics, Professor at the University of Pittsburgh, ex-Minister of Economic Development of Ukraine, Timofey Milovanov.
Yeah, so indeed, there are some numbers outside in the media. Some of them have to be verified depending on the final damage that will be assessed, but it appears to be sizable in hundreds of millions of dollars. The highest estimate, which is out there, is $7 billion. But that takes into account the cost of the new planes. There's a real question if these planes can be rebuilt in principle, because I'm not sure, and no one is sure, that the Russian military or defense industry has the capabilities right now to rebuild these planes. So I don't think that's possible. At least that's what I've seen from the so we can, from the reports. What we can put any number we want in terms of dollars, but it is irrelevant because this is simply, the cost is infinite. But what we also have seen is sort of expected, but not immediate consequences of the attack. Traffic jams, because now there is a paranoia, security paranoia, checkpoints. People are afraid, military, and the key effects are actually not in the attack itself. So economic effects. Military effects, of course, are in the attack, but indirect for the economy is the is fear, is the demonstration of capabilities of Ukrainian military and special services conduct operations. I think what's the most important part is that it's now clear, Russia has a much larger areas, essentially the entirety of Russia to defend, and so making it almost impossible to reach. And so they defend the small area closer to the war theater, and then now that's not the case anymore, to defend the entirety of Russia. This is not even very costly, it's simply impossible. So it of course depends on the Ukrainian capability to carry out more operations like that.
For the first time ever in history of war, with no loss at all and maximum impact, Kiev demonstrated its ability to operate autonomously, piercing Russian air defenses and conducting high-precision missions without any external coordination. Such yourself.
Here's the plane. It's burning down. I have 7 more of them to take out. I must take more water and go take out the fire on one more plane.
What the world finally saw is that Ukraine not as a recipient of its support only, but is an independent force capable of altering the course of the war indeed. And all of this happens on the eve before talks in Istanbul, where the initiative will now obviously lie with Ukraine. And as of now, Ukrainian drones show no signs of stopping their attacks on Russia. On the night of June 2nd, multiple unmanned aerial vehicles targeted various regions across the country. Air raid alerts blared in the air in the Moscow, Voronezh, Tula and Belgorod regions, amongst others. Also, Russian officials report ongoing drone strikes on their military airfields. During the night, the Russian Ministry of Defense claimed that between 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. roughly, their air defense systems intercepted and destroyed 53 Ukrainian fixed-wing drones over the Kursk, Belgorod, Bryansk and Oryol regions. Well, I guess we all can consider that a preparation campaign of sorts for the upcoming talks in Turkey with the Russian delegation. Remember their tone of voice, that ultimatum, 4 regions of Ukraine, now 6 tomorrow. Well, what can I say? 4 airfields in Russia today, 6 airfields tomorrow.
Diplomats are apparently some sort of superhumans. I don't know how tomorrow one can look Medinsky and other Russians in the eye and restrain oneself from smiling evilly. It would seem that the Russians should recognize that it is better for them to get out of this war, while some of the Soviet legacy weapons are still left. They are not creating new ones, and they can't. Yigal Levin, military commentator, IDF veteran on Telegram.
Simultaneously, with the drone attack on the night of June 1st, 3 incidents at railway facilities occurred in Russia, causing significant damage to the infrastructure. Late in the evening, a road bridge collapsed onto the railroads in the Bryansk region of Russia while a train was passing between Klimovo and Moscow. Russian investigators were treating the incident as a terrorist attack, although later any reference to that was simply removed from official reports. A few hours later, in the Kursk region, a railroad bridge collapsed on the freight train. Part of the train just fell onto a highway and a fire broke out. The incident is also being investigated by Russian security forces as a possible terrorist attack, of course. In the morning, another explosion on a railroad track occurred in the Bryansk region during the passage of a track technical measuring train. There were no casualties, but another explosive device was found at the site which did not detonate, but Russians say it was the result of, I quote, concrete fatigue. Whatever that means, of railroad bridges. It is all mixed up now, and each accident separately in Russia could be written off, of course, as Ukrainian sabotage. At this point, we can add here solely one thing: asymmetric warfare at its best. Well, you might ask, what's next? Well, pressure Russia to peace, or at least to a ceasefire with sanctions and tariffs. If, let's say, the Grand Blumenthal bill is passed, the war will be very quickly over, because Russians go to war with Ukraine solely for money, and money comes from oil and gas trade, and the oil trade and the war. It's as simple as that.
Our delegation is now in Istanbul, and we are ready to take the necessary steps for peace. Naturally, the starting point should be a ceasefire and humanitarian actions, the release of prisoners and the return of abducted children. And all key issues can be resolved at the level of leaders. And if Russia undermines even this initial agenda, and if the Istanbul meeting brings nothing, that clearly means strong new sanctions are urgently needed.
Well, that seems to be it for today. My name is Ernie Keane. This is UATV English. We were online. Thank you so very much for watching. Your subscription is very important to us, as Ukraine is craving the same values you are: freedom and sovereignty of state. So it was Newspulse. Stay tuned for more and see you in the next beat. Goodbye.